The top story, our developing story this afternoon, that big international news breaking story involving Venezuela. We can speak to Juan Carlos Pizon, who is a former Colombian defense minister and former ambassador to the United States. Juan Carlos, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News. It does seem that this was a rather extraordinary military operation that had been clearly in planning for many, many weeks to effectively capture the Venezuelan President Maduro.
Well, absolutely. It was evidently planned for a long time. As we know, there was a major naval operation and aerial operation inside Venezuela for some weeks now. And of course, that prepared the conditions for having these very clean, very specific operation that, ends Maduro's reign into his country. Let's not forget who's Maduro. He was a dictator. He abused Venezuelan people by not listening to the results of the elections and actually establishing himself as a dictator. For years, the Chavez-Maduro regime rejected and expelled like 8 million Venezuelans. 2 million of those went to my own country, to Colombia. Still they're there. And, that was a terrible human rights violation, but not to forget that he allowed the Venezuelan territory to become a sanctuary for drug trafficking, for crime, for terrorism, including Colombian terrorist organizations like FARC, like ELN, and other criminal groups, including Hezbollah and Hamas. And of course, all these created this condition to build up what is known as the Cartel del Soles, that actually was the one that is being prosecuted and allow these operations to happen.
That may all be true, what you're saying, but do you think the way the United States has gone about this, potentially having contravened international law, is the right thing to have done, for the president to have done?
Let's face it, ideally, everybody knows will be something else to be preferred. But the reality here is very unique. This government of Venezuela negotiated and failed to international community for years. And from his territory, I'm going to speak as Colombian and as a former Minister of Defense of Colombia, from Venezuelan territory, they were launching actions of terrorism with his permission into Colombian armed forces, into Colombian territory, into Colombian people for decades. So I think this is not a common situation. This was not a government, a regime. It was fully illegitimate. And sadly, it was really against his own people. Remember, Venezuela was the wealthiest country by the end of the 90s in Latin America in terms of GDP per capita. And today is one of the most impoverished countries in the whole Western Hemisphere. So, what they created against their own people, what they created to favor crime and terrorism, was very dramatic. And about my own country, this is something we need to care and understand the signal. Colombia cannot follow the same path that the narco regime of Maduro created. And sadly, the current administration, the Petro administration, has aligned with him. We have the opportunity peacefully to go to the ballots in next May and change the government and have a government that is serious, professional, that can stand against crime, to protect Colombians and to avoid any international action.
And just briefly, Juan Carlos, but the problem is that the US government now does seem to want to, if not by force, for the regime to change. This is quite a perilous situation for Venezuela. As a Colombian, you know only too well about the potential consequences.
Well, as far as we know, that regime was negotiating for years, and they failed every time. So this is finally an action that changes the situation and gives the opportunity to Venezuelans to go back again and recover their own country, and let Venezuelans recover their country so they can get back democracy. And as they get back democracy, they can have a government of reconstruction and stabilization. That's what we need, and all of us need to support that. The international community needs to work onto that. But what we cannot stand anymore is for narco regimes, for terrorist regimes, or for dictators that are promoting terrorism and crime all along the world. And I think this is a very specific case.
Okay, Juan Carlos, we appreciate your time here on Sky News following this developing story this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.